What's up, everyone? This is the Next Tape podcast with Mikel and
Tanyka,
where we have conversation on different topics. So, big month.
It is definitely a big month.
Huge month to celebrate.
Yeah.
Tell them what it is, Tanyka.
We are celebrating Pride Month. That's where we're at. Yay. So, yes, with Pride Month, we're going to definitely do better next year. We're going to do a full month dedicated to Pride. But for this year, we're going to do bonus episodes. And we're going to shed some light on the different parts of the community. With this episode, we're going to be focusing more on the transgender I think she would have been more of a transgendered person, but we're going to be talking about Marsha P. Johnson. And I'm very excited to talk about her. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to watch the documentary before doing this, but I'm very excited to talk about her. Don't know if you know anything about Marsha P. Johnson. Do you?
No, I never heard of her, and I never heard of her.
Okay.
But, educate me on this. Yeah, so go ahead. Take it away.
Marsha P. Johnson, he was born on August 24th, 1945, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, was unfortunately found dead July 6, 1992, in New York City. Unfortunately, there's not many stories that don't have a sad part of it when it comes to talking about people of the LGBTQ plus community, but we're going to definitely celebrate her life before we focus on that. So she was a Black American drag queen and activist who was dedicated to social justice for the gay and transgender community. She was a pioneer of the gay rights movement in the late 1960s and spent the following 2 decades advocating for equal rights for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community. Johnson also took part in gay pride parades and events. Johnson was assigned male at birth and began wearing girls' clothing at a very young age. However, after experiencing sexual assault at the hands of a 13-year-old boy, she temporarily stopped experimenting with feminine fashion, obviously to protect herself. After completing high school in 1963, she moved to New York City. There, Johnson began frequenting bars and nightclubs dressed as a woman called Black Marsha. Johnson gradually cultivated a unique personality and style and eventually began calling herself Marsha P. Johnson. She stated that the middle initial stood for Pay It No Mind, a phrase she often used when questioned about her gender and lifestyle. Johnson became well known in the LGBTQ community for her colorful wigs, often crowned with flowers or artificial fruit, red heels, sparkly robes, and multiple strands of costume jewelry. For a while, she performed with the drag group Hot Peaches. Johnson also earned money through participating in sex work, but she was often abused by clients and arrested on occasion. Johnson began going to the Stonewall Inn, which was a gay bar in the Greenwich Village section of New York City in the late 1960s. We will be talking about Stonewall next year.
Okay, yeah.
Because that has huge significance on of itself. She was one of the demonstrators present during the Stonewall riots in 1969, protesting against police harassment and social discrimination of gay and transgender individuals. Now, a popular urban myth states that Johnson threw the first brick at Stonewall, though this has been disproved, but I kind of like it. After the Stonewall riots, Johnson joined the Gay Liberation Front, which was a catalyst for the gay rights movement. In 1970, she co-founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, which acronym is STAR, with fellow transgender right activist. I can't talk right now.
Activist, yeah, don't worry.
Thank you. Sylvia Rivera. The two worked for gay and transgender rights while also providing housing for LGBTQ youth living on the streets. Johnson and Rivera acted as house mothers, guiding and protecting queer youth. In the 1980s, Johnson, who was HIV positive, became an AIDS activist and joined ACT UP, which was an organization formed to bring attention to the AIDS epidemic. That is also something else we're going to talk about next year too. I think it's very important to talk about the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
Definitely something to this day I just can't wrap my mind around how it got so bad, but the government is partially to blame for that. But we'll talk about that next year. She was noticed for her work and was even featured in a print series by American artist Andy Warhol. Throughout her life, Johnson suffered from mental illness and was in and out of psychiatric hospitals. Those who knew her described her as a volatile and unpredictable person. In July 1992, like I've mentioned already, her body was found floating in New York City's Hudson River. Despite the evidence and the state of her body, the police ruled her death a suicide. Although friends and family cited a lack of evidence supporting that claim, arguing though she had struggled with mental health, she never expressed suicidal ideation. Additionally, she was found with a head wound. So, for anyone who's heard the story of her death, pretty much believe this was murder. In 2012, the police, under renewed public pressure, reopened the case. They reclassified her death as a drowning from undetermined causes. But to this day, the case still remains unsolved. Because, go ahead.
So there's actually people who don't believe this wasn't murder?
The police. But I think a lot of people who have heard the story, who knew her personally, who knew of circumstances surrounding her death, don't believe this was a suicide and this was a murder. I, for one, believe this was a murder.
That's kind of sad that, you know.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this had to do with homophobia, transphobia.
Yeah.
And this is why this was ruled a suicide at first. And although it's now been reclassified as undetermined, it's still not murder. They don't see this as a murder case. They see this as a drowning caused by undetermined circumstance.
Crazy.
Agreed.
They should investigate a little more than that. So.
Yeah, but it's been so many years now.
Yeah.
It's been over 30 years that there's other cases. This is New York City, so there's going to be other cases that are now more important than solving her death. She deserves that.
Yeah.
So, as I've mentioned, several documentaries have been made celebrating Johnson's life and activism. In 2020, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced that a 7-acre waterfront park in Brooklyn was being renamed for Johnson. And I think that's pretty incredible. And that's basically the bonus episode for her. I do have photos of her that I'll post. And Yeah.
Okay. Well, the lesson I want to say, or say, the statement I want to say is that don't be ashamed on who you are.
Yeah.
Love.
I think before you continue finishing, I'll say
yeah, love fully, equally. Don't be ashamed of who you are. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
I think unfortunately I didn't get the statistics, but I think unfortunately hers is not the only case of a transgendered woman who have either been murdered, hurt, gone missing. There's a case of someone more recently, I would say, believe she disappeared in 2019 in Texas near the border of Mexico, and she went out and she didn't come home, and even though they can't find her, it is unfortunately pretty determined that something bad at the end of the day probably happened to her. And it's sad when you hear these cases, and unfortunately a lot of transgendered women are more targets of hate crime than anyone else. And there's not a lot of change there. It's like on the one hand, you want to say to them, be safe, protect yourself, and don't approach just any Tom, Dick, and Harry out there because you don't know who you're going to get, who you're going to talk to.
Right.
At the same time, it's like they should be able to be themselves. Women in general should be able to be themselves and be free, do whatever they want.
Yeah.
While they live safe. And unfortunately, that's just not the case for, in this case, transgender women. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate that there's hate out there. Or back then.
And now.
Now.
It hasn't changed.
But I feel like we have made progress.
Not really.
Really?
Not enough.
You don't think so? I mean, we have a lot of work to do, but I feel like we made progress.
Not as much as I will tell you right now.
All right.
From this, again, I didn't get the statistics, but the statistics are horrific for transgender Black women at that. It is horrific. The amount of people who are being hurt, who are dying, who are committing suicide, that too.
Right.
It's not great. Because the reason why I say this, why I wanted to make sure I shed light on transgender people, not just a gay person or a lesbian person. I wanted to shed light on them too. Is that even people within their own community don't accept them. So there is still so much work that needs to be done.
Well, I do see that because there's a lot, even the community of the
LGBTQ.
Yeah. Well, there's a community that's LBG only.
What do you mean?
So there is I seen a community that's on Reddit that disqualifies
I see.
Yeah.
So they're not doing the LGBT.
Yeah.
They're just doing LGBT. Yeah. That's sick. Because again, LGBTQ it's also plus. So it's you can't fit everything, we too many letters. Yeah. But LGBT has always been the case. They extended it to the LGBTQ plus in the last decade or so.
Yeah.
It's always been the LGBT community. It's always been that. The T has always been involved in that. So again,
I see in Reddit and Facebook groups
the hatred.
Yeah.
And again, that's not just the LGBTQ plus community that is doing it to themselves and to people of their own community. We don't just see it there too. It's also, Black people do it to each other.
Yeah.
It's just this hatred. If you don't understand something or understand someone, then learn. Don't single them out.
100% get educated. There's research on the internet. Also talk.
Yeah, there's enough hatred coming from people. Like right now, the states are dealing with the fact that, people don't want drag queens involved with their kids because, God forbid, something's gonna happen. We have enough hatred coming from just small-minded white men, let's be real here, that we don't need to have that small-minded mentality among the community too. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand.
No. The hate has got to stop. So
it does.
Just be positive. Just be positive.
Agreed.
So this ends this episode of the Next Tape Podcast. The Next Tape Podcast is available now on all podcast platforms. We also have a website called solo.to/Next Tape Podcast. Where else are we at, Tanyka?
We are on Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast, and Twitter and TikTok at Next Take Pod.
So we do have an email. Contact us at mikeltanyka@gmail.com. That is mikeltanyka. Sorry, my bad. mikeltanyka@gmail.com. So, we quite learned a lot about
Marsha P. Johnson and the transgender community in general.
Yes. And then we just talked about, the community as well, LBGT, and finish that off for me, Tanyka.
LGBTQ plus.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, anything else we gotta say?
Just spread love, not hate.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. So I'm Mikel.
And I'm Tanyka.
We are out until next week. Peace, guys, and positivity.
Bye.